Climate change and sea level rise are often talked about in terms of a slowly building problem many decades in the future. But Hawaii is getting hit right now with severe high water events. It's something Always Investigating's Gina Mangieri has been tracking. Gina, what have you found?
Joe, sea level rise itself is a gradual trajectory, but add in extreme tides and big swells, and we're already getting frequent flooding in more areas than ever before. We wanted to know what's being done to protect coastal infrastructure today and plan for a rising water future. Last week Friday, high water swamped areas across the islands, like here in Waikiki, breaching far beyond the usual shoreline and wreaking havoc in business and residential areas statewide. It was not a tsunami or a storm, but something becoming a new norm.
Very hard for people to... Just yesterday I saw one couple, the water came up on them, they weren't ready for it, and I think the guy lost his phone because the water got to it.
How far down does this affect?
It affects the bikers, the people that walk the bike path. I mean, they can't use it, obviously. Everything fills up, so it affects the community here.
What's going on? The University of Hawaii Sea Level Center explains.
We're seeing from the tide gauges as well as from satellite observations very high water levels around Hawaii. They've been persisting since the end of the last strong El Nino, the strong El Nino that ended in 2016.
The more orange on these moving swaths across the map, the more upwell. But wait, there's more, like we got a taste of last week.
On top of that, we had large tides. So we had a big high tide, high relative water levels, and then we had a high swell event. And then on top of all these conditions, we have the gradual rising sea levels with warming oceans and melting land ice.
Always Investigating has heard from residents and businesses seeing some serious flood problems they say have just popped up or worsened recently, like here in Waimalu.
This is low tide.
But at high tide, all of this lately has been a flood zone.
It comes up from the manhole right there. Customers driving in and out get affected. You know, their cars get wet. We're next to the harbor, so we're not too sure if it's salty, brackish water.
Here at Sanda Island, the flood waters come straight from the lagoon.
This is low tide.
This is high tide.
They seem to be happening more frequently. And the state of the science is telling us that this is very likely to become more and more frequent of an occurrence and likely to be more severe as well. Definitely a critical need there to really pinpoint which areas of the coast are most vulnerable.
This kind of gives you a little sort of a glimpse or a look into our crystal ball of what the future might hold with accelerating sea level.
Sam Lemo from the DLNR heads a public sector group to coordinate state and county climate adaptation.
The problem is sneaking up on us. It's a complicated, wicked sort of problem that we're all trying to struggle with.
Meanwhile, his committee is working on a report due at year end that gets a bead on the sea level rise situation and what to do.
That might mean raising or elevating structures or moving structures away from vulnerable areas. But then that involves a number of other issues because, you know, our coastal areas are very densely populated and very, very highly and intensely used.
That's longer term. What about right now?
Ho'opi'ilani Highway and going out to West Maui is routinely sort of inundated by high waves and high tides. They have began to look prospectively towards perhaps moving the road entirely away from these areas.
There's the erosion in Windward Oahu along a stretch of Kamehameha Highway.
We go and repair it, and we use concrete and we put more rocks in place, and we basically salvage the situation for the time being. But then there's this long-term creep that we failed to address.
Waikiki Beach is ground zero for the economic risk and the extent of infrastructure exposed.
What do you see now when it hits high tide?
Just a lot of water.
How far does it go up?
Up to or past the sidewalks over here.
One of the ways that you can deal with the problem of sea level rise in Waikiki is to continue maintaining the beach. If we continue to renourish the beach and basically maintain the engineered structures in Waikiki at a level that is sort of like sea level rise resilient, then we can actually protect the backshore area as well. And so I think we can kill two birds with one stone.
Knowing what's coming is tricky, though. The old reliable models like tide calendars that used to predict spot on years in advance are off kilter lately.
Currently, we're seeing some higher than normal tide levels.
They don't capture the relative sea level changes that happen with climate fluctuations. Last week, the offset between the tide prediction and what was observed was about 25 centimeters, about this much. That was one of the largest offsets that we would see in Hawaii outside of a major storm.
Consider last Friday a warm-up and mark your calendars and batten down the hatches. A potential battering is ahead in just a few weeks, what they call king tides.
King tides are very large tidal cycles. Even larger tides are in store for the end of May and then again in June and July. Is predicted to continue through the end of the summer. So that on top of even higher tides could set the stage for more coastal flooding, nuisance flood events, especially if they coincide with high swell events.
Is this a new normal?
Well, that's something that we're researching now. We do know that over the long term, sea levels are continuing to gradually rise, and that gradual rise in sea level is expected to cause nuisance flood events to become more severe but also more frequent.
The University of Hawaii has done extensive studies and ongoing looks at sea level and rising groundwater problems, too. The Sea Grant program has collected hundreds of photos documenting water rise hot spots. They want to see yours, too. And so do we, especially from the king tides. Check out KHON2.com to submit your pictures and videos. Gina Mangieri, KHON2 News.